Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the coaches, under the most pressure as we head into really the final couple of weeks, but specifically this week, so many coaches really close to punching their ticket to the conference championship, some a little bit closer to possibly getting fired. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this week break down, but let's get into that. Let's talk about all the games that went down even earlier this week and getting into this weekend, and we'll start with one that I did not have plans to talk about. I did not think this was going to be that fun of a game. But man, was it. They absolutely got after each other in Atlanta, about 10 minutes from me down I-85. They really got after each other, and it was a very, very fun game. A really awesome finish where you got 4 touchdowns in the final 7 minutes of this game. You got 5 total touchdowns in the fourth quarter. It was a lot of fun. They really got after each other late. It felt like NC State had locked up this game like 3 different times, and then Georgia Tech came right back down. It felt like Georgia Tech had locked up this game about 3 different times, and then NC State would make a play. So incredible game, and Aaron Philo was the story. An incredible player out of Prince Avenue. Actually, a couple of years ago, actually interviewed him. Very nice kid, incredible player, and one of those guys that he can really play. I did not expect this from him in his freshman year, but 19 for 33, 265 passing, did have 1 pick, but had 57 rushing yards in the game-winning drive and score with his legs. And on that final drive, 4 for 4 passing, 33 yards passing, 35 yards rushing, and a touchdown. The dude was incredible. It was really awesome to watch a kid that is essentially, an 18-year-old kid go out there, and his heart rate looked like it never got over 80. It was incredible to watch this kid go to work and was very comfortable in the pocket and might have just sent a little bit of message to Georgia Tech and maybe to some other teams out there that he is a very capable quarterback. I'm sure there were some other quarterback coaches around the country, some recruiting people that were watching this relatively closely on Thursday. But at the end of the day, it was an incredible game, and Georgia Tech ensures a winning season, which is incredible for the second year under Brent Key. It feels like everything around there just continues to mount. Not necessarily, shooting up to the top anytime soon, but absolutely, it feels like they just keep putting brick on brick on brick every single year. There's another year like that, and now they go to Athens with a chance to just ruin UGA season. They'd love to do nothing more than that, and they'll need another incredible performance from Aaron Philo to get it. And then for NC State, they got one more to get. They're 5-6 right now, looking for a bowl eligibility. UNC stands in the way, so we'll see what happens there. Obviously, a really fun rivalry game, so we'll break that one down in time. But another thing I wanted to talk about with NC State before we move on, CJ Bailey's a really good player. He made a couple of mistakes in the past game, but the reality was one was a tipped around, end around type deal where EJ Lightsey picked it off and went for the touchdown. I don't blame that on him nearly as much. And then the second one was Romello Height just making a ridiculous play. So overall, an elite athlete in every sense of the word. If he can get that passing just maybe 15, 20% better, I think this is a really dangerous player. I think this is a really dangerous team as we head into 2025. But a missed opportunity yesterday, a huge game for Georgia Tech, and a really, really fun one down the stretch, no doubt. And then Wisconsin-Nebraska. Cannot wait for this one because this is Big Ten football. And you best believe it's going to be Big Ten football, even though you have Nebraska still breaking in Dana Holgorsen. Wisconsin had fired Phil Longo earlier in the week, their offensive coordinator. It's going to be Nate Letton as well as Kenny Guyton kind of calling that offense, in charge of that offense. So we'll see what happens there. Going to be really interesting to see just how either of these offenses look. But I do think it's going to be a fun one. Both these teams are desperate to get a win, desperate to get over 500, and get to a bowl game at the end of this thing. And Nebraska has lost 4 straight. Wisconsin's lost 3 straight. They're just begging for a win more than anything else. And I do think it's going to be a quintessential Big Ten game. They're going to keep it on the ground. It's going to be a defensive battle. First to 21, 24 probably wins this game. I do think Wisconsin's going to get it done. This is more of a gut feeling than just about anything else, but I feel like Wisconsin's a team that a lot of people think much less of than they probably should. I think they're a really good team. I think they're going to be able to play incredibly defensively, and they'll get the win here, even on the road. Nebraska will have a million questions, as they always do, around this time on Saturday. And then you got Louisville this upcoming weekend. Cannot wait for this one to unfold because it's a very interesting game in so many different ways. You have two teams that last week alone were knocked out of the CFP race, were knocked out of the ACC race. Now they got to pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and try to finish this season strong because they got this game, and then Louisville, I know, has Kentucky you really want to finish this season at least with 8-9 wins if you're these two teams, especially with the way Pitt started. You very much want to get to at least 8 wins. So Eli Holstein is back to being healthy in this game, but the starter position has not been decided. I would assume that they're going to go back to Holstein. I'm not sure. Nate Yarnell played plenty good football as far as I'm concerned against Clemson, so would not be surprised if it was him, but in my opinion, I would throw out Eli Holstein out there. It just a personal position, but we'll see what happens in that respect. And then I do think it's going to be a really fun game. I think Louisville's going to give Pitt their fourth straight loss. This is one of those games where I think it's going to be a real battle, no doubt about that. And actually, I have a pick about that here in a second. But I do think that it's going to be a battle. But I'm going to take the team that's a little bit more explosive. So I'm going to go with Louisville. I do think Pitt fights tooth and nail for this one, and it's actually really, really tight. But I do think Louisville makes that one big play down the field that changes this game. Vanderbilt LSU, the game that might just decide Brian Kelly's future, as crazy as that sounds. But it is one of the more underrated games of the week. I think it's a really, really fun one. And Diego Pavia, does he have one more up his sleeve in 2024? He's given us a lot of great moments. Can he give us one more? And I tend to believe he's got one more in him. He's got LSU and Tennessee to prove that. So it's going to be really interesting to watch. But the LSU run defense has been really bad against quarterbacks just across the board. Diego Pavia, the difference between him and a Marcel Reed or a Jalen Milroe or Lenora Sellers, not necessarily the elite athlete that all those other guys are. What he is elite at is ball handling. What he is elite at is selling things and getting out in space where maybe there doesn't seem to be space. He's able to find it on the outside. He's able to really work with a lot of people's eyes and can just kind of play around with a lot of different things. So I think when you look at this LSU defense, it's really about more of them being disciplined than more of them having to just out-athlete the guy on the other side. So could be a little bit easier, could be a little bit tougher, depending on the strengths and weaknesses of this LSU defense. It'll be interesting to watch that. And then LSU and Brian Kelly just need this one. We talked about it earlier. They need this one just so badly. If they do not get this one, then some conversations are being had behind closed doors that I don't even know if they can do anything about, but they're going to have them. I promise you that. Then you got Cincinnati going over to Kansas State, and this is a very interesting game because it could mean nothing. It could mean the world in the Big 12 because Kansas State, you are still technically in it. You can back your way into the Big 12 championship if everything around you goes almost perfectly right. Let's just be totally honest. Now, you have a little bit more of an open path with the game over against Iowa State coming up, but at the end of the day, they very much need to get this win if they want to salvage the season at all, even if you don't get to the Big 12 championship. 9-3 season has to feel pretty good, and then Avery Johnson going into 2025 with a little bit more confidence, maybe you get this thing rolling downhill a little bit more. And then I do think the Cincinnati team has been tons of fun with Brendan Sorsby. They started the season really strong. They have lost 3 straight, and they've really struggled to get things going. They've really struggled to especially stick with elite athletes on the outside. So I think Kansas State has enough of those guys, whether it's Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards and DJ Giddens running the ball, whether it's a couple of those receivers making some big plays. I just think there's too many guys for Cincinnati to deal with for Kansas State, and I do think Kansas State wins, and they keep the slimmest of hopes for the Big 12 championship alive. Virginia Tech Duke is one of those games that Virginia Tech's had kind of a tough season. Duke has had a very solid season when I think I would have bet on those two schedules or those two records, being totally flipped. Duke 7-3, Virginia Tech's 5-5. If you had told me that, I probably would have flipped them and said, no, you're wrong. I definitely got it right. Virginia Tech has to be 7-3. Duke has to be 5-5. But Duke's played really, really good football. And for that, Malik Murphy has played really good football for Duke. It's been a little bit up and down, some INT troubles, especially in that Miami game. But him with Star Thomas is an elite duo. They're very, very awesome. And one of those offenses that is a little bit, we're going to run the ball, we're going to run the ball, we're going to run the ball, and then we're going to hit you over the top for an 80-yard touchdown. That's kind of the way they go about business, and with a guy with the arm strength that Malik Murphy has, I cannot blame him for that. The dude can throw a thing a country mile. It's absolutely incredible to watch. But I do think this is going to be a ground and pound kind of tough game one way or the other. I think Virginia Tech just has more guys. I think Baishal Tutin's going to come back really, really strong. I think Kyron Jones is one of those guys that is going to show up in a big-time moment like this, and I do think Virginia Tech gets the win. It could be a little bit ugly, a little bit sloppy throughout this one, but I think Virginia Tech gets the win and, at the very least, gets bowl eligible before that game against Virginia. Then you got this one over in the Rose Bowl. Technically, UCLA is the home team here. Doesn't much matter, obviously, but they are technically the home team. But it is going to be incredible to get a little bit of a taste of a rivalry before we get into the big-time rivalry weekend. It's going to be awesome to watch. And this is a very interesting game because you do have UCLA that has to get a game if they want to get to a bowl game under the Deshaun Foster era. Obviously, do have Fresno State next week, but feel pretty confident they can handle business there. But for UCLA and Ethan Garbers, they've been a very, very solid team pretty much all year, and they do a lot of the things that USC doesn't, which is essentially just scrap out games, play games ugly, play games a little bit in the 20s and the 17s, and make things a little bit uncomfortable for teams. I think they can do that against UCLA, or I think they can do that against USC. I do think Jaden Mayava has been huge and will be a really good player in time for USC. I think UCLA is going to have this thing rolling. I think TJ Harden has a huge game, and I think UCLA keeps their title hopes alive, and they got one against one of these teams. Fresno State is who they're going to be playing in a couple of weeks, and they are favored against Colorado State, who is undefeated at the very top of the Mountain West, and it's going to be a huge one. If Fresno State were to win this game, the door would open pretty much wide open for UNLV to possibly make it back into the Mountain West Championship and then possibly get another chance at Boise State at the end of this. But it's going to be a really, really fun game, back and forth a little bit, and I do think it's two teams that kind of are heading in different directions in some ways. Fresno State has lost 2 straight. They gave up 36 points to Air Force last week. So you're looking around and you really want to go bowling, no doubt about that, and you got to get this one if you do. But a lot of different things are happening all around this team, and it feels like they're a little bit off kilter at different times. Now, all that being said, they are favored by 3 points here. So it's a little bit of one of those lines that, are you taking it? Does someone know something? That type of thing. But going to be a really, really fun game to watch, and I think Fresno State is going to get it done. I think they're going to give the opening for UNLV, and it's one of those games that I think is played right around in the 20s. Both these defenses very solid, but then Mikey Keene makes that one play for Fresno State. They win the game, and they continue moving on forward with a possible shot at a definite shot at a bowl game, but would help out UNLV quite a bit with a shot at the Mountain West Championship. But going to be incredible to watch all of these games unfold. Obviously, we got some big ones. Those are a little bit more under the radar, but plenty of really fun ones, especially on the night slate, to kind of play around with and see which one's going down to the wire, which one's a little bit more bland. Play around with your TVs a little bit and have a Saturday more than anything else. But let's take our third break here, and when we come back, we got to talk about my best bets. A ton of different bets on here, and went a little bit below 500 this past weekend, hoping to get back on track, and I feel very good about my picks this week, so we'll talk about it right after this, so stick with us.